you can tell she just wants us all to be happy and full and to have dessert afterwards. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce to you a woman who is the BFF of all of those who love cooking and eating, the incomparable Anna Garten. So let's start out by talking a little bit about how this all began. How a little girl from Brooklyn grew up to go to the Carter White House.
You have to remember, it was Brooklyn before it was cool to be from Brooklyn.
Well, so, all right. A little girl from uncool Brooklyn went to the Carter White House, then bought a food store, and suddenly became Anna.
Well, you know, it sort of happened in a series of things. I got married. I married Jeffrey when I was 20. I mean, best thing I ever did. And I have to say, he always encouraged me to do what I love to do. So I was always interested in science. So when he lived in Washington, we both lived in Washington. And I thought, well, you know, it'd be interesting to work in science business. So I worked in the White House in nuclear energy policy. And when I hit 30, I thought, this really isn't me. What I like doing is entertaining. I like cooking for my friends, and I come home at night and I do that. I used to buy old houses and renovate them. I love that sort of like, get in there, roll up your sleeves, and just do it. And when I hit 30, I said to Jeffrey, I really want to do something fun. I mean, really different. And he said, the only thing that you need to know is, he said, just do what you think would be fun to do. If you love doing it, you'll be really good at it. And I said to him, you know, it's funny, I saw an ad for business for sale in the New York Times, and it was a tiny specialty food store, and he said, let's go look at it tomorrow. And the two of us drove up to the Hamptons. I'd never been there before, and it was a small store called Barefoot Contessa that had been there for about a year, and I just thought, this is what I want to do, and we bought it.
Did you have a clue?
Not a clue. I didn't know how to slice smoked salmon. I didn't know how to tell whether the brie was ripe. I didn't know where to buy anything. But the woman who sold me the store stayed with me for a month. I thought a month would teach me what I need to know. Wrong. And she really taught me what I needed to know. And I learned, it was a tiny store. I learned by building it. I built a bigger store, and then I moved to East Hampton, built a bigger store, and I really learned by doing it. And in the beginning, I would make like herring and potato salad, and nobody bought it, so the staff ate it for lunch. And then I learned that's not what people want. Or I made like a veal with morels, some fancy thing. Nobody bought it. So I thought, okay, people want to eat roast chicken and roast carrots at home. So I made all my mistakes in a small store and then built from there.
And when did the idea of doing a cookbook first come to you?
It never did. After about 20 years of running a specialty food store, I thought, you know, I really need to do something different. I knew how to do that, and I felt like it was time to jump off another cliff. And so a friend of mine who was a therapist said to me, type A people think that they can figure out what to do next while they're doing something, and they can't. You need to just stop. And so I thought, okay, I tried to figure out what to do next for years, and I couldn't. So I sold the store to 2 employees, the manager and the chef, and I built myself an office upstairs, and I sat there for the worst year of my life, trying to figure out what to do. And after, I mean, there was a time Jeffrey would go to Yale, and he'd leave or maybe it was, yeah, he was at Yale then. He would go to Yale on Monday, and I'd say, I have nothing to do this week. And I'm like, he said, nothing? I said, no, I have a manicure on Wednesday, but that's it. And finally he said, you know, stay in the game. You love the food business. Think of something else to do in the food business. And I thought, well, maybe I'll write a book while I figure out what to do. And that's how it started. It was really in sheer desperation. And my friend turned out to be right. I never would have gotten out into that pond and splashed around if I hadn't been bored out of my mind. And once I splashed around, I thought, oh, this is actually fun.
Can you look back on your 1 or 2 single biggest cooking mistakes? Not on television, not in terms of the cookbooks, but in terms of, I gave a dinner party and...
Oh, that's a good question. I gave a dinner party and it was a disaster. Well, one of the key things I always say is nobody ever knows. So, I mean, there was certainly, I remember there was one dinner party where I was making a dessert, and I can't remember what it was, and it was a total disaster. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to serve for dessert? They're coming in an hour. And I just went in the refrigerator and found creme fraiche and vanilla and honey in the pantry and some berries, and it turned out to be one of my favorite desserts. So it came out of, like fresh fruit and honey vanilla creme fraiche. So sometimes out of that, you end up with something that's good.
So you never sat at the table with a group of people putting something in your mouth and thinking, oh, this is not good.
I can attest to that. I sit at the table and go, I wish this were better. Or I didn't salt it enough, or I overseasoned it. Somebody said to me once, and I've never forgotten it, the most common mistake people make in cooking is the thing that everybody has in the house, salt and pepper. And it's a very easy thing to make a mistake with. You either under-season it or over-season it. So, sometimes I've gone, put too much salt on those scallops, but hopefully it's just fine-tuning.
What are some of the other mistakes that beginning cooks make? What are some of the things we do wrong?
Well, I go back to actually shopping. The shopping is really hard. And I took a friend of mine who wanted to learn how to cook to the grocery store one day. And I said to him, here's a recipe for pesto. I'd love to watch you shop for it. And he went to the olive oils, and as anybody has shopped for olive oils, there are like 1,000 of them. And they have every name, and they're all different colors, and the jars are, and we had to talk through olive oil, because if you pick the wrong one, you've got a completely different tasting thing. And we finally got it, and he reached for the olive oil, and I realized it was an 8-ounce bottle, and he needed 2 cups of olive oil. So he was going to get home, and he had a problem to start with. So I think the shopping is really the hardest part, that you need really good ingredients that are in season, so they're going to taste great. You can't make tomato salad in the winter. And, you just have to buy stuff that's in the season, and you end up with simply cooked food that's really delicious.
Could you talk a little bit about mentors, about people who helped you along the way and made it somewhat easier?
Well, I don't think I really had somebody who, other than the woman who sold me the store and stayed with me for a month, who was fantastic. I would say I've been inspired by people along the way. Martha Stewart was an incredible influence. Eli Zabar, because it's very simple, really delicious food. And I love to travel with Eli, because he'll go up to somebody at a food market that has a little table with raspberries on it, and he'll say, "What would you make with these?" And I'm thinking, Eli knows what to make with raspberries, but he wants to know what the person who grows the raspberries makes with it. And I just find that he's just endless curiosity. I find that really inspiring. So those are the people that are sort of endless. And Martha, I always found endlessly curious.
You seem so different.
We seem so different? Well, I admire her
you're
curiosity.
Brunette.
What?
You're brunette.
I'm brunette.
Did you learn something from her about building a brand, about running a business?
I have to say I never set out to build a brand. I always just did what I loved doing, and somewhere along the way, it sort of connected with people, because I think what I do is not give people something. I show them how to do it for themselves, and I didn't do it deliberately. It just evolved, and I find that really satisfying. But I never set out to say, I want to be a brand, or I want to have a huge business. I just sort of every day did what I love to do, and it just worked out really well.
Finally, I'm having a bridal shower, and I want to give the bride 3 pieces of kitchen equipment.
Oh, that's a good
What
question.
are they?
What are they? A great set of knives. I would say probably a KitchenAid mixer, and a great set of all-clad pots. And I think with that, you can pretty much, it's an expensive bridal but if everybody does that, I think that's, you're set for life.
Well, okay, so I give her that, and then finally what I would give her, of course, is what you were nice enough to send to my daughter Maria, which is a complete set of your cookbooks.
Thank you.
Because then life is perfect.
Thank you, Anna.
So thank you for everything that you've done for all of us.
Thanks.